Hi everybody and welcome back to Project SWA. This is lesson number 8 and today we are going to get pretty messy and we're going to go outside and collect some amazing objects because we are going to focus on prehistoric art today. And I think that it's really incredible to think about what these artists created with the materials that they had. So first and foremost, I want to talk about prehistoric art and cave paintings. So there are a lot of famous cave paintings in Europe, but they are finding more and more caves with incredible works of art in Indonesia. And I think that's really incredible because it totally changes what we thought we knew. For the longest time, the caves in Spain and southern France were thought to be the oldest in the world that had cave paintings in them. And so we thought that higher cognition developed in southern Europe. And, that whole principle of out of Africa, the great migration of the Homo sapien, we thought came from Africa, went to Europe first. And then this is where they were creating these newfound concepts, this higher order cognitive thinking, cave painting, early art. But they have found caves in Indonesia that have paintings like 20,000 years older than the caves in Europe. And that's really amazing. So it's turning science, it's turning the art world essentially on its head because, again, we thought we knew something. We did all the science, the radiocarbon dating, the research that went into these caves, and we're still finding more. And it's just amazing that we think we know our world, but there's still so much we have to discover. So we are going to discover what is in our own backyard today. So we are going to create our own cave art. And obviously we don't have a cave to paint on. Maybe you do. Maybe you're going to paint in your basement. Ask your parents. But we're going to use paper today. And we are going to make cave art using materials only found in our backyard, which is going to be really fun. So it is actually raining today. So I'm going to bundle up and go outside and try to see what I can find in my backyard. I encourage you to do the same. And a rainy day is a good day to do this because the moisture is going to soak into all these items and it's really going to help us get some nice transfer of pigment. If we're using dry objects, sometimes we don't really get a nice transfer of pigment. So I want to show you what I made. I chose a handprint. Hands are really iconic in caves. You almost always see them before you start seeing depictions of animals and even depictions of actual human forms. Hands almost always came first. And scientists and researchers and anthropologists believe that it was a place marker. It was saying, I am here. This is me. This is my home. And think about it. Our hands are really important. We achieve so much every day with our hands. And honestly, I think we need to give some cheers to our hands right now. We are washing them like crazy. We're coating them in hand sanitizer. Let's show them some love. Let's give them a little bit of honor depicted in our own version of a cave painting. If you don't want to do your hand, that's fine. Ancient cave paintings also depicted deer and wild boar. Sometimes, especially in Spain and France, there were bulls and horses. Occasionally, you would find human forms. There's even cave paintings, closer in time, when we get closer to our current era, that actually have depictions of hunting scenes. So people riding horses, people with bows and arrows. And that's really kind of incredible, seeing them use these tools, these spears. So again, I went original. I chose a hand. And I want you to just look at this for a minute. I did this with things only found in my backyard. This is not paint. This is not crayon. This is not colored pencil. This is natural materials from my yard. This is mulch and leaves and bits of berry pods. So go have some fun. Bundle up, put on your rain boots if it's raining where you are. Go find some amazing materials. And you might need to experiment a little bit. Something that works the first time might not work another time because of it might run out of the pigment in there, or it might be too dry, or something you think is going to work really well might not work at all. So this is a really fun experiment today. So I am going to go collect some more items to make another painting for us, and I will see you in a little bit. Bye. Okay, so I just came back in from outside and it's actually raining right now, which is, in my opinion, it's a good thing because it means that the most of these materials that I've collected are damp, and that's going to help me transfer their color. So you can see I have some wet leaves. I have some blossoms from my crocuses, and these are the ones that are kind of spent and wilted. I have a couple chunks of wet mulch. Now, I have a couple trees in my backyard that produce these really interesting little pods that are kind of reddish, so I'm hoping that they're going to transfer some color. And I have a wood stove, so I grabbed a couple pieces of charcoal. So this would be a really fun opportunity to poke around your backyard. And you can see I don't have a lot that I can work with here. It was a little challenging, but I liked that because it really helped me connect to those ancient artists and think about, they didn't have the opportunity to go to the store. They couldn't just buy paint. They had to make it, and they had to make it with what they had in their local area. So this is what came from my yard today. I have a pencil, I have a sheet of thick white paper, and I have a little bit of leftover coffee. So this is really going to help us get kind of a nice tempered tone. Like, this is really bright white, and I really want to bring this down to a nice neutral color. Now, if you don't have coffee, you could use tea, or honestly, you could mix some mud with water. Be creative and see what you come up with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint the coffee on my white sheet of paper, again, to kind of tone it down. And the coffee's really wet. You can see, this is liquid. This is water, essentially. And it's really going to curl up my paper. The very first thing I'm going to do before I start painting is actually going to tape this using masking tape to a piece of cardboard. That's going to help it from curling up and getting warped. And the cardboard's also going to help absorb some of that moisture. If you don't have cardboard, just put some paper towels underneath. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. It's definitely a lot darker than that bright white. You can see there's a couple areas where I didn't go all the way through. Now, I could keep going on this, but I feel comfortable with this color and don't want to make it too dark because I'm worried that some of these objects won't show up. So I'm just going to go ahead and peel off my tape. And we can get started. So we talked about earlier with these ancient cave paintings, the symbolism and the importance of what these artists depicted. A lot of times it was hands, and the hand is found in a lot of these caves, and archaeologists and scientists believe that this was a place marker. This was saying to the world, this is me, I was here, this is my home. It's also thought that it is a symbol of strength. In many Indonesian caves, they're finding these hands, but it's also a common tradition now to put a handprint in the center of a new home, offering blessings and strength to that home. So a hand is always a really good option. If you're going to do a hand, you might want to trace with your pencil. There were deer and boars. In the caves in France and Spain, they actually found bulls with their big horns and these gorgeous depictions, as well as horses. So think about these ancient animals. What would you want to show? You can also depict a crude figure of a human. Try not to make it look too realistic, because at this time, these artists were mostly working in shapes. We don't have a lot of detailed shading until around 17,000. Whereas the majority of the caves that we're finding now, especially in Indonesia, around 35,000 years ago. So that's really incredible. They've even found handprints from almost 40,000 years ago. Guys, that's insane. That's absolutely amazing. And it really debunks this idea that art started in Europe. These paintings found in these caves in Indonesia are 20,000 years older. So that's really incredible to see that what we thought we knew about the early human existence is really changing, and we've only scratched the surface. So let's start to work on our object. I'm actually going to do my handprint because I think that's really interesting. And I'm actually going to turn on the bias because I'm using a piece of scrap paper. My hand's almost a little bit too big for this. So I'm going to go ahead and trace around my hand with my pencil. You can add the wrist or you can just close it off at the bottom. I'm just going to close mine off. Now, the handprint paintings normally were voided in the middle, meaning they didn't have any color. And the color sprayed out from the outside. It's so beautiful. And the thought was that the individual would place their hand down and then they would spray paint or pigment over the hand, either using a hollowed reed or a tube, or even sometimes just in their mouth. And that's really cool because when they would pull their hand away, the print would be revealed and you'd have this streaks of color coming out from the edges. So I'm going to try to do the same thing. Obviously, I'm not going to put these items in my mouth and blow, but I'm going to follow this edge and pull out. So I'm going to go ahead and I really want to start with my charcoal. So just light charcoal lines, and you can see, this is charcoal for my fireplace and it's absolutely making lines no problem. And the nice thing about charcoal is it's kind of smeary. So you can see it's on my fingers. After I put it down, I can pull it out with my finger and kind of blur these lines. So I definitely encourage you to try to smear things around, experiment, see what technique looks best to you and what you enjoy the most doing. Another option too, you can see this is transferring onto my fingers really easily. I can actually color on my finger and then rub it on like that. That's kind of fun. Maybe when you're doing your coffee staining, you don't necessarily want to use a paintbrush. Maybe you can find a part of a pine tree and use the pine needles as a paintbrush. That would be really, really creative. Or a feather. See what you can find outside. Experiment. Remember, today we are going back in time. You didn't have paintbrushes like this. You had to work with what you had and what you can find in nature. Okay, I don't want to go too heavy on the black, so I'm going to put the charcoal away and I'm going to start to experiment with this wet mulch and see if this gives me a really nice brown tone. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. See guys, anything is possible, but you didn't know that you could paint with mulch. Ah! I got a little bug from the outside. Come over here, buddy. I'll have to take him back outside. Okay, I'm going to try some of these wet leaves and see what I get. I'm actually going to try to fold them. And I'm going to drag and see what happens when I do that. Oh yeah, it works. It's a lot lighter. It doesn't transfer as easily as the wet mulch and the charcoal, but it works. That's fun. It's a lot softer. That's kind of nice. And all I did was just kind of fold it up and rub. There you go. If you haven't raked all your leaves yet, you can go outside and find more art materials. Use this big one. We have a bunch of really old maple trees in our yard, and even though we raked our leaves in the fall, it seems like we're still raking our leaves. Okay, so the maple tree, the big leaf didn't work as well as the little leaf, so I would choose smaller leaves when you're working. This big one isn't giving me a whole lot of color transfer. Now I'm going to try these little seed pods. They are a bright red in the fall, and you can see now they're pretty dull, but hopefully they'll give me some color. Come over here. Okay, so you can see that the seed pod outside didn't work very well for the color, but the little seeds still left on the inside gave me this really nice orange color, so I'm happy with that. Again, you're just gonna have to experiment and see what you get. Lastly, I'm gonna use the crocus flower. Now, again, the petals, I chose crocus flowers that were already wilted and spent because I want to keep the nice pretty ones out there. So I'm just gonna kind of wad this up and see what happens. Again, you're good. Oh, that is gorgeous. I don't know if you can see it, but it definitely is giving me some really nice yellow. It's kind of falling apart in my hands, but that's okay. Today's a messy day. Oh, that's really nice. I like this yellow so much that I'm actually going to bring it all the way around. It's gonna just help tie everything together. Even though we are using absolutely rudimentary materials, doesn't mean that we can't be mindful of our design. It's really kind of crazy to think that we created this today, not using any traditional art materials beyond a pencil. You know, we used coffee for the initial stain to kind of tone down that white paper. I used a variety of things I found in my yard. The charcoal was the first thing. I used the wet mulch, old wet leaves, these spent crocus flowers, and the little seed pods from the bush in my backyard. And it's really amazing to think that this is how it was for so long, even in the Renaissance. You know, very few people could afford to purchase paint. And the paint that was made was really toxic most of the time. So people crushed and made their own pigments. They made their own dyes, you know, not only for painting, but for fabric as well. You know, and it wasn't always just for fine art. They could have been painting the walls of their house and found some beautiful stones and crushed them into a powder and, you know, mix them with some sort of solution. So I think that's really amazing to think that, you know, we've kind of lost this ability to go out in nature and find what we need. So again, I highly encourage you, poke around your backyard. Maybe take a walk down the street or to the parks. Take a little bag with you and start collecting objects. You might have to experiment. You might pick up something like I picked up this giant maple leaf. And it didn't work. I was thinking that this bad boy would be amazing, and it didn't work. The smaller leaf worked a lot better. So experiment with it and see what you can come up with. So that is the end of our lesson for today. I hope that you all have a wonderful time experimenting with these natural materials, and I hope that you can check out the further study links so you can see these masterpieces that these people painted on these cave walls. It really was incredible. You know, this was tough for me and I was working on a piece of paper. So if you can imagine a stone wall, that's something else. Have a wonderful day. I gotta go wash my hands. I'm pretty dirty now. See you later.